Hmm. Hey,
Hey, um, edit, rename.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. I've been
Great.
having a lot of trouble with my audio at different platforms, so I'm glad I'm not having trouble on this one.
Hi, Sarah.
I am muted. Can everyone hear me?
Hi, John.
Hey Jessica, can you hear me? Yeah.
Still gonna wait another minute or two since we only have about, looks like we have five task members now. We have five task members. That's six. Okay, so we'll get this going here. Just checking with Christina that we are recording. I see that we're recording, so that's great. And I'll pass it off to Christina to do a roll call.
You there, Yuko Mino, Jason Dorn, absent. Mark Pullum, absent. Thomas Blant, don't see you there. Vice Chair Deanne,
Here.
oh, okay, present. Jack Halsey,
Here.
absent. Jeff Shearer,
Yep.
Chair Brandon Nom, I think
Brandon sounded like he was going to be out, and Jason. Oh, Jason Dorn and Brandon just logged on. It looks like.
I think that'll. Did I get everyone?
Looks like that on my end. Jason and Brandon, welcome. I noticed that you're both off mute. If you wouldn't mind just muting to make sure that we're not getting any background noise, that would be awesome. Thank you. Oh. So here is the agenda today. I adjusted it a bit to accommodate the extra time. We had a request to extend the meeting by half an hour. So that half hour will be at the end will be reserved for some any additional questions. It will pad that draft code amendment discussion part of the meeting. But I'm going to hand it off to Brandon to take a vote on last session's meeting minutes. That would be the 5th meeting, the Tree Task Force meeting number 5.
Okay. Yeah, Sarah sent out the meeting minutes last week, so I hope everyone had a chance to review it. Does anyone want to be the first one to nominate moving forward with those minutes, or does anyone have any amendments for it?
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Does anyone want to second that?
Second.
Okay, I think we can take a vote. Do you want us to raise our hands virtually?
It's up to you, Christina.
I'm abstaining because I was not at the meeting.
Oh. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Right. So moving on to project updates. I usually start off with the charge statement here. You're all very familiar with it. But I just want to remind everyone of the responsibilities as a tree task force member is to provide input on how the amendments that we're discussing today align with the urban community forestry plan, enhance the long-term sustainability of Lake Oswego, and ensure that they comply with state law, clear and objective standards, and the new House Bill 4037. So we are at the last tree task force meeting. We made it. We are wrapping up soon with the Planning Commission public hearing and the council hearing coming up in June and July. And so, yeah, we're excited to kind of get your input on this drafts and get these amendments in front of council again. The objectives for today's meeting are to share project updates related to House Bill 4037. I included this in the meeting packet with a link to that House Bill language, but Jessica in a minute will explain a little bit more about what this is about. I want to share out the results from our work sessions with the Planning Commission and the DRC. They had a joint session with the Sustainability Board and Parks Board as well in their joint work session, and in the City Council work session, which all happened between our last meeting and today. And we brought a couple issues specifically that we want to get clear direction on from the task force, which are the forest management permit changes and hazardous trees on private properties. This is the first time that we're bringing this issue directly to you all, just outside of the full draft code document. And we wanted to have some time for open Q&A to answer any remaining questions from task force members and have some open discussion. I received several comments today by email, so I will go over those. And then we can kind of have a free discussion and responses to that. And is there a hand, Christine?
Yeah, Sarah, I don't see any slides. Are you on presenter mode?
Oh,
Does
should have
any-
been.
Okay, I just want to see
Thank
if any,
you.
I think Morgan might have also.
And Sarah, while you're
Okay.
doing that, I just want to note for Christina, for documentation purposes, that it looks like Amy Holbrook just joined. So I just want to make sure that we
Yes, I
note
got that.
that
Thank
she
you.
is in attendance in the meeting too.
Okay, can everybody see the slides? Good thing there wasn't any really important visuals. So, yep, the meeting objectives I just went over. We'll be wrapping up the project today, but I'll pass it over to Jessica to give you some more background and context on House Bill 4037 and how it relates to this project.
Thanks, Sarah. So since the last task force meeting in March, the state legislature was meeting and creating yet more laws that we need to comply with. And in particular, House Bill 4037 was a housing bill that contained a number of provisions, one which directly affects part of our work here with the tree code. And it was signed into law by the governor on April 7th, so it happened after the last tree task force meeting. And essentially the pertinent parts of that bill that affect the code amendments that package that we need to put forward in order to comply with state law is that it for clear and objective applications, we are no longer allowed to provide notice to properties beyond 100 feet of the site. So that means that we can require mailing of notices to properties within 100 feet, but we can't require them to post a sign, and we can't require, we actually have to be even careful how we put it on our website as when we post type 2s on the website for the public. We will still do that, but we will not post it as a notice of the application. In addition to only being able to provide notice to properties within 100 feet of the site, it only allows an applicant the ability to appeal the decision on a tree application for clear and objective standards. It also only allows the applicant to appeal a decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals. So what that means is for clear and objective track, no appeals can be filed except by the applicant. That does not affect the discretionary track, and we're going to talk about that later today in our discussion. It's one of the items, but I do want to point out that we would maintain the appeal opportunity for those. And just as a reminder, for clear and objective track, that only applies to housing applications, which is probably about 16 to 17% of all the trees removed in the site. So I just want to keep that in context it's a very concerning thing, but I do also want to give the context that it is a smaller subset of the number of trees that are removed from the city. But it looks like, Jeff, you might have a question about this.
Yeah. Did you say you don't have to post it anymore on site?
For the clear and objective track, we have been advised by our city attorney that because if we posted it, that would potentially constitute notice beyond 100 feet of the site, that she advises that we don't do that for the clear and objective track.
Okay. So you wouldn't put a sign then out where the tree's coming out?
For the clear and objective track, no. For the discretionary track, yes.
Thank you.
Rob?
What about marking the trees that are to be removed? Would that be
Still
considered?
must be done. Yes.
That
And
still has to be done.
It has to be done because we have to do the verification to assure that they meet the minimum retention requirements. So we need to know which trees. So we can still require the marking of the trees with a yellow ribbon. We can still require site plan. Our application requirements is still the same. We just can't provide public notice beyond 100 feet.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions about this change?
This has
Okay.
been reflected in the latest draft of the amendments, so I do want to point that out. If you want to look for it, it is in the appeals section, which I don't have the page number right in front of me, but I can get it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. All right. So these are all of the topics that we brought to you all as the tree task force, the Parks and Sustainability joint session, the PC and the DRC joint session, and City Council. You can see there is some overlap on a lot of these topics. These were the ones that you're very familiar with the format of these meetings. I go over the topic, I give context, I compare it to the existing code, and then we provide some policy alternatives. So we did that for each one of these policy discussions on the left with these different groups. We brought the last 4 to City Council because they have to do with city resources. So that's why there wasn't as much overlap with those, but we reported back on what everyone said about these other policies to each kind of subsequent group as we went. So they all knew what you all gave as feedback and what you all voted for during your last meeting. So we're gonna spend a little time on this slide. There's a lot of information here. I just want to report back on the results of each one of these policy discussions. So it's just to orient you again, we have the issue on the left, the resulting policy that was chosen, or like an update on what's happening with that right now. And on the right side, there's a check mark in the color of the specific body that either voted or provided general consensus in support of the result. If there's a dash, it means that there wasn't a consensus for the tree task force. That was a result of your voting, and that meant that there wasn't 2/3 consensus. And we'll start at the top here. This is an issue that we brought to you all about tree removal for solar access and defensible space last time. You all recommended to remove the solar and defensible space provision and utilize the Lake Oswego Fire Department education and outreach. So both the Tree Task Force and the Parks and Sustainability Board were in support of this. And so that's what's currently reflected in the draft. For clear and objective standards for residential units, there wasn't a consensus. It was split 44% between the draft policy and the policy alternative. So we offered further clarification when we brought this issue to the Planning Commission and the DRC about what the application process would look like. And to remind you a little bit more about this topic, this is when for instance, somebody wants to do an addition on their home, but they could also possibly want to do an ADU. And so we offered a suggestion for the application process that if they are adding a dwelling unit to their lot, they can combine other adjustments. Jessica, you can. Do you have any more examples of the like a driveway addition, a pool, landscaping, and other non-dwelling unit additions and remodels for the application? They can be combined under the clear and objective track as long as there's at least one unit, additional dwelling unit involved in the plan.
Yeah, that's about right. Or it's a brand new dwelling unit, because it also applies if you tear a house down and rebuild it.
So we provided that clarification since the topic and the questions were brought up, like, would this make it complicated if people are doing multiple things? And with that context, the Planning Commission and the DRC was comfortable having clear and objective standards only apply to new dwelling units, but it could be other types of permits could be combined if there's a new dwelling unit. under the cleared objective track. For the significant tree definition, we asked you all, should it include the last tree on the lot? And should we add that clear and objective table of species and sizes to the significant tree definition? The tree task force was, let's see, 0% voted to just include the last tree, and 33% voted to only add the revision of including a table, but 44% said, let's do both. And the Planning Commission agreed with the majority of the tree task force, that 44%, to both update the significant tree definition to include last tree on the lot, and also to add that cleared objective table into the significant tree definition. Any questions on those first three? Yes, Deanne?
Could you just remind us with the including the last tree on the lot, does the code specify the DBH?
With the last tree on the lot, let's see, need to pull up.
It has to be greater than 15 inches.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So moving on to 4, expanded mitigation requirements. I should have these up at the same time. We presented the options to expand tree replacement requirements to all type 1 removals except fruit trees, as well as dead, declining, and EAB susceptible and hazard trees. We removed that emergency tree removal per Deanne's suggestion. In the public right-of-way and sensitive lands, and when the tree removal is part of an approved plan. So there was 80% tree task force consensus on this. We brought this, there wasn't consensus on item C, which was do not require replacement of EAB susceptible and invasive trees removed for restoration of fire prevention in city parks and natural areas. So there was a majority, but not a consensus from tree task force. So we brought this to the Sustainability and Parks boards for their feedback, since this is something that they deal with very intimately every day. And they kind of broke the tree task force tie there, and they were in support of not requiring restoration for fire prevention in city parks and natural areas. For the clear objective track retention percentages, we brought you kind of all of the data that we gathered and how we ended up at the range that we proposed. And we asked you all, does 45% sound good? Does more sound better? Should we lower it? And the tree task force had no consensus on the exact retention percentage, but there was a slight preference for a higher retention percentage. And we asked both the Sustainability and Parks Board as well as the Planning Commission and DRC, and they were both comfortable moving forward with the 45% retention standards. Yeah, Mark.
A question. Is the 45%, is that the total circumference at DBH, or
It's
is it
for both
total numbers?
Total number of trees on the lot,
Total number of trees.
or 45% of total DBH.
Gotcha.
The cleared objective track has those two options.
Has the two.
So the same percentage is applied to both.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can pull up slides as well to jog everyone's memory, since this information has, come through to you in many ways and many different forms in slide decks. It just might take a moment. So I can help kind of pull up some more resources at the end if we want some more clarification on previous concepts and what was asked. But I have a very long compilation of slides that I'd have to go through. But it is here, and I can if you have a request for that. For number 6, mitigation with native plantings on sensitive lands, We brought this to the Sustainability and Parks Board joint work session, since this is again something that really affects their work. And there was general consensus there was general preference and some support, although it wasn't across the board from everybody present. 40% voted to allow tree mitigation to be met through the removal of invasive plants or by planting native plants in sensitive land overlays. 10% were undecided, and 50% voted in favor of only doing this on city property. So right now in the draft, we have it to only allow mitigation through native plantings and invasive removals for city projects so that the city staff can oversee this and can make restoration decisions around this. It would be pretty challenging for planning staff to oversee, enforce, and monitor private lands that have significant land overlays or significant lands on their property in terms of like the quality of restoration efforts, the quality of mitigation and plantings. So that's why we've kind of moved forward with this path just to allow it for city projects, despite there being kind of mixed feedback from the Sustainability and Parks Board. Just want to give a little background there. For the clear and objective track incentive, we brought this topic to the Planning Commission and DRC. This was to set a higher percentage, higher than 45%, where if a developer preserved, say, 70% of the trees on the lot, they could skip public notice and appeals. But this is no longer relevant due to the changes by House Bill 4037. So this is being just taken out of this has been taken out of the code and the draft changes. And moving on to the 4 issues that we brought to council, we brought the applicability of forest management permits, which we also brought to the Planning Commission and DRC previously. And there was a lot of public comment, and the team went back to the drawing board and created some new policy options and presented them for council. And so we're going to go over all of those policy options and give you that background when we move on to that part of the policy discussion next. But there was consensus from the council there. All 3 other topics that we brought to council were split. There were 5 counselors present. All of them were split 3-2. So for the appeals process for the discretionary type 2 applications, as a reminder, this is the proposal to move from having the DRC appealable to council process of public notice and appeals and shifting that so that it's going to be under a hearings officer. And you all provided feedback on this during the code concepts portion of the project. I think it was 100%. It was like one of the only majority consensuses we've had from the tree task force that it should just go to a hearings officer. But we brought this again to council since they had kind of discussed this at depth in a different work session, and it was still split. 3 counselors wanted to keep the process as is, DRC, and then appealable to council after the DRC makes a decision.
It's the other way. 3 counselors wanted to go with the hearings and 2 wanted to keep it the way it is.
I thought Mamboop, Afghan, and Corrigan wanted to keep the process as is what I have in my notes. Corrigan switched because
sorry.
No, that's okay. It's all there's a lot of notes that we have from all these meetings, so there's a lot of information happening. What I recall is that Corrigan has originally been in favor of the hearings officer, but since we've had these changes with House Bill 4037, Councillor Corrigan felt that there was some power being taken away from the public during the appeals process for the clear and objective track. And she didn't want to take more ability to appeal and get in front of boards and hearings with the discretionary track. So for context, she did end up switching because of that. This is, that's the note I have there. I don't know, Morgan or Daphne, do you have anything else to add since you were there for context about this one, or?
No, based on my notes, you covered it, Sarah.
And then for the maintenance responsibility for trees in the public right of way, we brought this to council. There was general consensus. Consensus was, not entirely met in a way that reflected the policy alternatives that we presented. So Mayor Buck framed trees in the right of way as being like in two categories: those that function as private trees on undeveloped frontages and trees inside of developed right of way, so like sidewalks and tree wells and planting strips. And the council generally felt that trees that function as private trees should be managed by private property owners, and trees that function as public trees and public right of way should be managed by the city. And maintenance would remain the abutting property owner's responsibility for dead, dying, and hazardous trees. But because this would involve a lot of kind of rethinking about what this means, and a budget would need to be created if this was to happen, the team has pulled this from this amendments package that's going to be going to the Planning Commission and Council in this session, and it will be returning to council. Jessica, do you have a timeline for that? I remember it was in the memo and I'm blanking.
Yeah, so I'm going to be, we'll do a study session because it also involves policy about right-of-way management beyond trees. So I'll partner with our engineering director and we'll come back to the council. We told them either the end of this year or early next year.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about sidewalks, which was not covered in this, and so it's kind of wrapped up into this greater discussion that really needs to have more of an engineering involvement, and so it's being pulled from the package right now and to be revisited later. But the Parks Board is hoping that a lot of the EAB related topics, they're prioritizing getting those through in this session, so we don't want to keep anything in there that's going to just be like a very big bump in the road and prevent any of these other any other amendments that are really important for the city right now and for parks management. We want to make sure that we're not leaving anything in there that's going to set this up for failure. And then the last topic that we brought to council was about hazardous dead trees and private property. So if there's two private property owners and one of them has a dead hazardous tree, if the city can enforce removal through a citation of that private property owner. And again, it's a hazardous tree to another private property. It's not hazardous to the right of way or to like fall in the right of way. And the council was split here as well, with 3 councilors favoring option A, which is no change to the current code, and 2 councilors favoring option B, which is to enforce removal. Are there any further questions on these last topics here that we brought to council?
Can you talk a little bit about the discussion on the hazardous dead trees on private property and what that kind of was like at city council?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pulling up my notes here.
Isn't that one of our discussion items, Sarah?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well,
thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. I'm so in the notes right now. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't getting sidetracked from any of these 11 important issues. But yes, Jessica, you are correct. The 2 policies that we have slides for are the forest management permit and hazardous dead trees on private property, because we'd love to get the tree task force direction so that we can that can inform our next steps and the draft that we bring to the Planning Commission. But if there's no more questions right now, I'll move on to the policy discussion on forest management permits. So this topic that we brought to the Planning Commission and DRC in its earlier form, and then the council with a different set of policy alternatives asks the question: should the minor forest management permit criteria be revised to require a clear connection between tree removal and forest management objectives? So the intent of the forest management permit is to sustain forest cover and health and assist property owners in managing forested properties on lots that have a minimum of 1 acre in size that contain at least 1 acre of tree canopy. This permit type was added to the code in 2015, so that's 11 years ago, in response to a council goal. And the purpose was to provide a more flexible tree removal permit process for large land parcels, focused on more like urban forest management principles rather than regulating individual tree removal while maintaining the wooded character of the city. So there are currently 2 types of forest management permits. There's minor and major. The minor forest management permit allows limited tree removal per year without public notice or appeal requirements, and it's not tied to any specific forest management objectives. This is the permit type that we're going to focus on tonight. There also is the major forest management permit, which doesn't have a limit on how many trees are removed, but it requires a forest management plan that's prepared by a qualified professional that ties together the removal of these trees to forest management objectives. It does also require public notice and appeals, but to date, no one has ever applied for a major forest management permit. So again, today we're focusing on the minor forest management permits. During the update to the Urban Community Forestry Plan and in early study sessions with council, there was a perception that there are some loopholes in the forest management permit type that allow areas that are normally considered to be a forest to qualify for a permit, and golf courses were cited as an example. So we pulled some statistics about the current uses of forest management permits. Again, these are minor forest management permits. So from 2015 to 2026, there were an average of 19 trees removed per year. So that's 226 total trees removed and 14 permits. And so that accounts for 0.65% of all trees removed annually, so less than 1%. Since 2015, these 14 forest management permits have been submitted by 6 applicants. 3 of those applicants accounted for 154 of the 226 trees removed, so over half. These aerial photos shown here show one of these 3 properties in 2015 and 2025, 10 years apart, and a total of 78 trees have been removed from the site under a minor forest management permit. And these photos show the Oswego Lake Country Club in 2015 and 2025. A total of 63 trees have been removed from the site under a minor forest management permits since 2015. These 2 photos show a third property, the third property. In 2015 and 2025, a total of 13 trees have been removed from this site under a minor forest management permit since 2015. This map here shows private and public properties in the city that are at least 1 acre in size with 1 acre of tree canopy. So those that would be qualified to apply for a forest management permit. And the red outlined properties are those that are ineligible for forest management permits because they are covered or mostly covered by sensitive lands. Yes, Jessica.
I just want to add a little bit of clarification here, because even though all of these properties are technically by size and tree canopy area could potentially be eligible, we did not discount them because they contain sensitive land. So it could be that part of the property contains sensitive land. So for instance, Waluga Park is one of those where there's a huge chunk of it that could not qualify, but there's probably some area outside of it that would. So even though it's showing the whole property, it doesn't mean that the entire property is technically eligible. Another one is Merrillhurst in sort of the bottom right-hand corner on your screen. That whole area has a lot of sensitive lands in it. I'm sure they have property or acreage that's at least 1 acre of tree canopy outside of that, but the portion that's in sensitive lands would not be eligible. So I just wanted to clarify that, this isn't a ton of properties, but it's even a smaller subset because many of these do contain at least sensitive lands on at least parts of it.
Yeah, thank you for that context. All right, so currently there's 3 policy alternatives that we offered council. Option A currently reflects the current draft code amendments and is to retain the existing code and not, sorry, that's an old note. Option A reflects the existing code, not code amendments. And it doesn't have any changes. And some advantages of making no changes to the forest management permit are that the impacts of these permits are relatively small given the low percentage of overall tree removal in the city for this permit type. This permit type provides flexibility for large-scale tree management and reduces complexity of applying for multiple permit types to manage the tree cover on the lot, and treats all large properties the same. Some disadvantages include that refraining from making amendments to the code lacks alignment with the intent implied by forest management, and the public may continue to perceive conflict with the use and intent of forest management provisions. Policy option B is the new policy alternative that's in the draft code currently that you all received in the meeting packet today. So it requires applicants to show that tree removal supports these defined objectives, including pest management, disease prevention and treatment, protection against catastrophic events such as wildfire and storms, water quality protection or improvement, management of species composition, or thinning of forest health to provide a fuel break or to manage native habitat type. So some considerations for this policy alternative is that it aligns permit use with forest management objectives, directly kind of looking at best practices and the urban community forestry plan for guidance on this. And it directly addresses concerns about the intent and potential misuse of the permit type. And it continues to allow golf courses to remain eligible. We heard through public comment at the Planning Commission, DRC work session, and at the council work session. We had public comments. We had written in comments as well, supporting the golf courses' current management of their trees and their land, and people advocating for them to still be able to use this permit, and kind of advocating for their current stewardship of the land. And not wanting to remove them and disqualify them from this permit. And this is where these new options came out of. So this policy alternative does have some potential downsides, like it adds review complexity and potential subjectivity in the evaluation of whether the tree removals align with these purposes here. And it requires a separate type 2 tree removal permit for non-forest management reasons. Option C is to refine the definition of large forested tract. So this option would revise this definition to specify that to count in the minimum 1 acre of tree canopy, clusters of tree canopy must meet a minimum size threshold to be determined. So this would prevent single trees or small clusters of trees from being counted in that 1 acre per canopy minimum qualifier for large forested tracts. And if this policy option is chosen, staff would draft a minimum cluster size for consideration at public hearings. This option could be combined with policy option B that I just presented, but would further limit eligible properties that may have trees or small tree clusters scattered across a large site, such as apartment complexes or the golf course. This option would better align eligibility with what's commonly understood as a forest, and it would limit the permit type on dispersed or ornamental tree groupings, but it would likely exclude all or a portion of some large properties currently eligible for the permit. And legitimate forest management issues can also apply to dispersed and ornamental trees. So this would also remove that flexibility. When we originally brought this to the Planning Commission and DRC, the policy options were retain the forest management criteria, which includes and allows golf courses to use the forest management permit. And the other option was remove golf courses from qualifying for forest management permits. With all of the public comments about the stewardship of the golf course, they both voted for no change to keep the golf course to qualify for forest management permits. But after some more discussion with the teams, with the city and various different stakeholders, the team developed these two other policy options: policy option B and policy option C. And then these three options that are on the screen here were brought to council. So council saw these three options, and there was majority consensus from council for policy option B. 4 of the 5 council members present were in agreement with B. The 5th council member wanted option A, and nobody voted for option C. So both Deanne and Mark wrote in some comments about the forest management permit. And instead of just, talking more and hearing my own voice more and reading your emails out loud, I'd love to pass it off to one of you to maybe start the discussion. Deanne, you just unmuted, so.
Sure, I can start. So I want to say I do like what they did with the revised criteria. I think that's important, and I'm glad that's included. And but I guess I want to go just one step further and revise the definition of the large forested tract. The way that I read it, you've kind of talked about it as a loophole. I as I read the definition of large forested tract, and then how it could be applied. The definition, that kind of starts at the early parts of the tree code. It says something like, at least one, the property is at least 1 acre large, and then there's at least 1 acre of tree canopy. And so the way I see that, you could potentially have a very large acreage, like the country club or other places where you have I don't know, maybe let's say 40 acres of property, 1 acre of which is tree canopy. And then you could, it seems to me that you could then, remove a lot more trees than what's really intended with this management permit. So that's why I just suggested in my email revising the definition of the large forested tract to say something about that, where those removals are happening, it should be within some kind of contiguous canopy. And then, as you mentioned, I think, the team decides whether that's a percentage or a size. But I feel like it's important to avoid any unintended misuse. That's all.
You, Deanne. Yeah. Mark?
I'd agree with Deanne. I think it should be continuous canopy rather than clumps of trees for large pieces of property, because they're really not forests. If they're simply just a clump of trees and a clump of trees and a clump of trees with a lot of grass, that's not a forest in my mind. So it shouldn't be lumped into a policy that's supposed to be utilized for forestry and forestry management. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. I know Jessica and Morgan, we were discussing this earlier. And did either of you have any kind of thoughts about kind of revisiting policy option C with council? None of the 5 counselors present were in favor of this, so it's a little hard of a sell to bring this back up. But I wanted to pass it off to Jessica to share her thoughts on this.
Well, maybe we can hear Jeff's thoughts or questions first, and then I'm happy to put my 2 cents in.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Jack.
Okay, so I learned to play golf at the Muni. I'm also a member of the country club. We are an approved use. An approved use, you should be able to take care of your property in a manner that it's supposed to be used. And being able to be a steward of the trees and the grass and the property at Oswego Lake Country Club, I think the club has done a very good job over the last 120 years. Every tree, excuse me, 99.9% of the trees on our property were planted by the country club. We have managed it very well. This whole thing came up because two people were disgruntled and went to the city and asked them to intervene on their behalf. It's wrong. There's right and there's wrong. This is wrong. The country club has never abused its rights. It's always did the replacement trees that we were supposed to. We've been good stewards, and this whole issue is wrongly headed. And it's not staff, but it's not right and it's not fair. It'd be like saying to the hunt club, you have to start planting trees in the middle of their big grass field behind the stables. It's wrong. It's an approved use. So option A is the option we should vote for. Because if you go to option B, that means when it comes time to pull some trees out for playability, which is what you have, it's a country club, it's a golf course, it's not a forest, then you have to apply for type 2 tree permits. Then if you're going to do that, you might as well change the use. I mean, this is just not right. And it really think it's unfair and it makes me angry. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Brandon?
Yeah, I have a clarification on the concern from Deanne. So are you concerned that there might be a piece of property that has an acre of forested stand or canopy, and then they go ahead and like remove trees that are outside of that stand by using the forest management permit?
That's my concern when I read the definition and then when I read the code, that the way that the forested tract is defined, it doesn't require that the tree removals would have to be within, like an actual forest, an actual group of trees. So it's for me, it's just that it's just a clarity of definition, so that a forest management permit would be actually applied to forested land.
But if there was a contiguous piece of forest and they applied for this permit, is that how most of the trees are at the golf course? Or Jeff, do you think that it should apply to like individual trees that are individually standing outside of a stand should be able to be removed through this permit?
It's a golf course. So is the Muni.
I guess I'm just asking, like, is the conditions at the golf course, are they mostly like contiguous stands of trees, or is it kind of a mixed bag?
It's a mixed bag.
Sarah, can you bring up the aerial photo from the golf course a couple slides back?
But whether it's the Muni or Lake Oswego Country Club, they're the same. Trees are part of the geography, if you want, of a golf course. And when they're changed with the what I want to say, topography when they feel they want to change the course, or they want to trim it back so they can still get to the holes and not be obstructed. In 20, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but prior to the remodel that we did a couple years ago, we had and this is by LiDAR from an outside vendor, we had about a 23.5% coverage. After the remodel, we're down around 18.5% coverage, which is more than Waverly, on the par with Tualatin, and less than Portland. The Muni, he didn't have the LiDAR information. He didn't give it to me. I'm imagining, just because I walk by there every day, that the Muni's probably around 23% would be my guess. But they're all about the same, and it's a game. So when the trees get too big and start to interfere with fairways or greens, because you got to be able to grow grass, they need to be cut. And all these trees you see, the membership planted, all of them, because this was clear cut back in the 1900s, early 1900s. So I really think this is punitive, and it's because two guys went to one of the counselors. I think it's wrong.
Yeah, I appreciate the viewpoint, and I want to reframe this as not just being about the golf course, right? I mean, I know that's what was brought up, and I regret that the golf course kind of got targeted. That certainly wasn't the intent. It was just used as an example of people don't classify this as a forested area. I think we can all agree normal people would not consider that to be a forest. And I think that's been the criticism of the why it's applied, why the urban forest management permit shouldn't maybe be applied to certain properties. And that's fine. But I would also point out that besides the golf course, we have apartment complexes that have clusters of trees throughout a site. And when I was talking through this with our project team, if we tie all tree removal to the forest management objectives, in our minds, I don't care if the trees are located within a huge contiguous canopy or if they're in smaller clusters. There's legitimate reasons to remove trees for forest management purposes. And while the forest management permit is based upon the principles of forest management, nobody in this city is maintaining their trees for logging or silviculture or any other purposes like that those kinds of principles were based upon. So practically speaking, it was a combination of trying to utilize those principles, but also making it easier for large landowners who have a lot of tree cover to be able to manage their trees. And so trying to separate out, well, we should target this use or this use or this use, the idea is if you have cumulatively 1 acre of tree canopy on the site and you are going to manage them for legitimate forest management purposes, maybe it's for pests, maybe you had a large storm event and many of the trees were damaged. It doesn't matter if you have a contiguous tree canopy or not. Those trees need to be managed on a site that is really large, that contains a lot of tree canopy. So from our perspective, and Morgan, I don't know if you have anything to add to this before then we can go back to Jeff and then Daphne, or maybe Daphne does too, from a staff perspective. We felt that by tying it to specific forest management objectives, you are removing sort of non-forest forest management reasons, like I know Jeff was saying they should be able to manage their golf course as a golf course, but we have other permit types that they can utilize for that. But if the golf course has legitimate pest management issues or storm management or thinning for the health of trees, they can still apply for those permits like any other large landowner, but they would not be able to remove trees for the purposes of, putting in a new driving range or something to that effect. They would still have to come in for a type 2. As would any large property. So if you're an apartment complex and there's a tree that's damaging your building, you couldn't remove that with an urban forest or a forest management permit. You'd have to come in for a type 2. And we'll come back to you, Jeff, but just from a staff perspective, Daphne, did you have something to add? Oh,
Yeah, I just wanted to say that from my perspective, the forest management applications that we've gotten in from the few people who've submitted them, we get really good information from the golf course. They have submitted tree tables with, you know, the trees have insect problems or the roots are girdling. They've given us good information that it's not just a blanket, we need to remove these trees for, grass. Um, and the other applications we've gotten, some of them give us no information because they're not required to. It's just they meet the standards, and I don't like that the golf course was sort of pegged as this. I wish, I've told Jessica this, that I wish more apartment complexes would use this because they come in shot put, for a dead and a invasive and then a type 2. And this permit, I think, would work really well for these kind of properties if people understood how to use them. And I think the golf course, from my experience, has done a pretty good job, just from a staff point of view and a staff perspective.
Thank you. Jeff,
Can you
I'll
go
have
into the
you.
options?
Yes. Jeff,
you.
I'll have you speak next, and then we're gonna take a vote on this one. Since we're already running a little behind schedule and we want to leave some time for some open discussion. But yes, Jeff.
Well, I know you're going to hate this, but why are we in a forest management permit bracket anyway? Why isn't the Muni, the country club, mountain park, the hunt club, large property owners in a separate section with their own rules? We're not a forest. We're not. No more than the Muni is, Mount Park is, or the Hunt Club, or any other major private recreational facility. So putting us in the forest management designation makes everybody think that we're a forest and we're trying to be Mount Hood National Forest. That's not the intended use, nor is it the approved use in the code. But I think we're in the wrong place um, I think, as soon as you hear forest management, everybody thinks, oh, it's a forest. They shouldn't cut any trees. That's crazy.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
one
would
of them.
strongly recommend option A.
Thanks, Jeff. And I would just point out that the golf course isn't forced to be in the forest management. It's an option for them that makes it sort of easier for them to manage permits. But
well, we should have other options for owners.
They can apply for type 2, dead, hazard, invasive. All of those are available to the golf course. So it's not like it's taking away their avenue. But I get what you're saying, Jeff. But I just want to clarify that it's not, you're not forced into that permit. It is an option for large landowners that meet the criteria.
Yeah, but you're tightening the requirements for us where we've managed really well over the last, 15, 20 years, and over the last 100 years. But since you've had this, and nobody likes something taken away. Okay.
Well, yeah, thank you for all of your input, Jeff, and sharing your perspective with everyone here. So acknowledging everything Jeff shared today, everything Mark and Deanne shared, and what was discussed, as well as the fact that 4 out of the 5 counselors were in favor of policy option B. I would like to administer a poll, but Christina, you're the host. Are you able to administer polls right now, or should I verbally administer it?
Yeah, I don't know how to do the poll. If you want to, I can switch you back to.
Okay, so I'm gonna put, it would be the options here are policy options A. Oops, I sent that. Policy option B only, or policy options B and C. So I'm gonna have the tree task force members vote by raising your hand. Again, John Wendland, you are a liaison and not a voting council member, or not a voting tree task force member. You're very much a voting council member. So you can only vote for one here, and Christina, if you can help me record these. I'll have tree task force members present. Raise your hands if you're in favor of policy A. Okay. Thank you. Can remove your hands. For policy options, option B only. Raise your hand. Okay, you can lower them. And policy option B and C together. So keeping B, but then adding the revised. All right. So is that correct that that's out of 7 total, 7 members who are voting members here today? Okay. So that is there's no majority and no consensus there from the tree task force. It's 43%, 43%, and 14%. But thank you for having that discussion. I think it's still very informative for the project team as we think about what we're going to include in the draft moving forward to the Planning Commission. I'm going to move on to the hazardous dead trees on private property now. We want to leave we're running a little behind, but we want to leave at least 15 minutes for just open discussion and to address some of the comments that were written in by email. But the hazardous dead trees on private property was a topic we brought only to the council. And we asked should the city enforce the removal of dead trees on private properties that pose a risk to nearby properties. We brought this to council, and out of the 5 councilors present, there wasn't clear consensus. So we would like to present these options to you and hear what the tree task force thinks. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold. As you can see from the existing code, it currently requires property owners to address dead trees if they are hazards to the use of public property or the public right-of-way, which does not include situations between 2 private homeowners. And the key issue from this project, the first phase of this project where we developed that list of key issues, resulted in the key issue evaluating options for addressing dead and hazardous trees on neighboring properties. So this was an issue identified by that whole process at the beginning of the project where we talked with all the different stakeholders and interacted with the public and all the different advisory bodies for this project. Current practice right now, if there's a private property owner with a concern about a neighboring private property's tree, is to advise the property owner that this is a private matter and offer them resources like mediation services to kind of engage with their neighbor and find a solution. But in the public engagement and stakeholder engagement phase, several residents mentioned that the code does not adequately address this issue. In our stakeholder interview with somebody who had been dealing with this for several years, she expressed concern that she'd not been able to get resolution through the city. And after 3 years, she was actually able to find a resolution through the neighborhood association. And so the city didn't have to intervene for her scenario. And the code section was actually modified in 2013 by ordinance number 2617 to limit dead trees as a nuisance only to those trees threatening public property. So as it is now. This change was made in response to a large number of complaints received by code enforcement staff from private property owners that wanted the city to force their neighbors to remove a tree that they believed was dead or dangerous. And the code was modified due to the amount of staff time and resources it takes to resolve these types of complaints. So the code amendment as drafted would resort back to this pre-2013 code. And again, would likely result in an increased amount of staff time and resources. It would also, as a potential drawback, continue the reliance on, to maintain the current code. This would avoid new regulatory burden and enforcement burden and all of the resource issues that I just mentioned. But it would continue reliance on private resolution, which we've heard from the public and many stakeholders is not ideal. And there's potentially unsolved safety risks when there's one homeowner or private property owners that are just not taking care of the trees on their property. Policy option B expands responsibility to the private property owner. And so updating the code to clarify this responsibility gives the city the authority to require this removal of dead trees that are within striking distance of specific types of buildings and infrastructure. So this establishes a process for addressing dead and potentially hazardous trees on neighboring properties. Non-dead and potentially hazard trees would still be addressed through methods not involving the city. And upon receiving a nuisance complaint for a dead tree on a private property, the city would need to contact the property owner, arrange an inspection, and determine if there's a dead tree within striking distance of the target. If the nuisance condition is determined to be met, the city would then order the removal of the trees through a citation. So some advantages are that this addresses the public safety concerns that were brought up at the beginning of the project. It reduces risks to neighboring properties and gives them the ability to, bring those risks to the city, and inform the city of those risks. And it provides an enforcement mechanism. Some disadvantages are that the increased enforcement responsibility reduces the capacity of code enforcement staff to address other priorities. If there's non-compliance, the only tool is a citation, and this process takes months. So the issue may still not be resolved in a timely manner, and the dangerous tree could still be there. And there's a potential cost burden on property owners. Of particular concern are those that cannot afford to pay for the removal and for the citation. So these are the options that we presented to council. Policy option A, no change, or policy option B, to enforce removal. And we'd like the Tree Task Force's opinion. 3 council members were in favor of option A, no change. Some of the concerns cited is that the city just kind of didn't want to put themselves in the middle of these legal disputes and potentially and private citizen legal issues. And then there were 2 councilors that favored enforcing removal, and they kind of talked about their concerns over safety and these trees that are not being addressed being public safety risks and risks to residents. So does anyone kind of want to bring up anything, Rob?
So just for my clarification, if somebody under the current code has a dispute with their neighbor over a dead tree, at any point in time, does the city come out to evaluate the condition of the tree to verify that it's dead or not? Or would that burden still lie on the property owner to prove that it's a dead tree? And under a new policy, would that responsibility be to determine if it's a dead tree? Would that be on the local arborist consultant to the city? Would that be the burden of the city or the property owner?
Great question, Rob.
Great question.
Under the current code, if the tree is threatening public right-of-way or public infrastructure or buildings, we would typically either identify it or respond to a complaint. And we would typically go out there and say, yep, it looks dead, and we would follow through. So we would do kind of our own assessment. If it's on private property and it's between 2 private property owners, unless it was obviously dead, like if it was like in a state of decline, we would put that burden on the property owner, because we don't have enough staff resources, because we're going to get far more complaints. So we would likely put that on the private property owner. But if it is very obviously dead, of course, we don't need an arborist determination. But the tricky ones are the ones where maybe it's in a progressive state of decline, or it looks like it's not in good health. Then it becomes a little trickier, and we would put that burden on the property owner.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this actually comes up quite a bit, in our world, where we have trees that are on adjoining properties or shared by property owners, and and they have a difference of opinion about the condition of the tree.
Yes.
And then, of course, the first call is to the city, thinking that the city enforces this, when in fact, it's my understanding it's a civil matter. And then the city just kind of has an opinion about it more than anything. So anyway, thank you for the clarification on that.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons why this is problematic. I mean, staff does not, I'll be honest with you, staff does not support this. We don't want to go back to the 2013 or pre-2013 policy. For that, one of those is that very reason is there's dispute over whether a tree is actually dead. There's dispute sometimes whether who the tree actually belongs to, and it becomes real complex fast. So they're difficult to resolve.
Yeah,
so is that where the city wants their resources to go to? So
I can see how hard it would be for the city. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Brendan?
So right now, if there's a tree on private property that threatens the public right of way, that can be sent to the property owner and require them to address that tree.
Yes.
And then I have another question too. So looking at hazard trees, is that the same hazard criteria as it would be for a hazard tree removal permit?
Morgan?
It's the same definition of a hazard tree.
It's Brandon, that's true. I mean, I think a lot of people look at dead trees and assume that they're high risk hazards, but arborists know better that not all dead trees are high risk. So yes, first question, is it dead? And second question, does it meet the hazard criteria?
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments before we take this to a poll? Again, it will be like a raised hand situation. And before I call a poll for these two policy options, I noticed Yuko, you're on the call, but I didn't record you in the last poll. Christina, did you get Yuko's vote, or did you abstain from voting?
For the last vote,
I thought I voted. Did it
Okay.
not go through?
You got it, Christina?
I got Jeff, Rob, and Yuko for A, and Jack H and Mark Pullum for B, and then for B and C, Deanne. Is that correct?
Okay. I think I also got Amy for policy A. So policy A actually had 4 people instead of 3. And I wanted to correct that while.
Okay. I missed Amy.
Okay. So it was out of 8. For the last one we had.
Yes.
8. Okay. Sorry. Then I just wanted to correct what I said earlier when I was doing some fast math. It was 50% were for policy option A for forest management permits. And then it goes down to 3 out of 8 is, and then 38% for policy option B, and 12% for policy option B and C. So I just wanted to correct that before we go on to a new poll. All right. So Brandon, you're going to be abstaining from this vote on the hazardous dead trees on private property, it sounds like. But would those tree task force members who are voting members raise your hand if you're in favor of policy option A? No change. Okay, thank you. Christina, do you have everyone's hands before? Oh, people start putting them down, but I think I got them.
Counted 7.
I also got 7. Great. Okay, so you all can put your hands down. Thank you. And would the tree task force members raise their hands if they're in favor of policy option B to enforce removal? Okay. Great. So we have 100% of the, or we have one person had a no vote, so it will adjust the totals a little. But 7 out of 8 present members voted for no change A. So this gives us a very clear direction on what to include in the next draft and what to inform council of. So thank you.
I thought there were 8 yes votes. I thought everyone voted yes.
Sorry, who's speaking? I have so
Jack
many screens
Halsey.
up.
Sorry.
Jack. I have Jeff, Jack, Deanne, Rob, Andrew, Hugo, and Mark for A, and that's 7. Was there anybody
Brandon.
who I called? What?
So there's a total of 8 members, right, present? And
Yeah,
so
I chose not to vote on this one.
And Brandon's not voting.
And Sarah, did Andrew's vote get recorded in the first poll?
Christina's taking the official meeting minute notes. Christina,
am
could
not.
you read back that first poll to us?
Okay, yeah. So for A, I have Jeff, Amy, Rob, and Yuko. For B, I have, sorry, I just wrote down Mark Pullum, Jack H, for B, and then for B and C, just Deanne. I do not
Christina, I voted A on that. Not sure if it was recorded.
I have Brandon for policy B and Andrew for policy A. So Christina, can you please update your notes so that it's policy option A, Jeff, Rob, Yuko, Amy, and Andrew?
Yes.
So 5 members.
I added
For
Andrew.
policy B, Mark, Jack, and Brandon. And for policy B and C, Deanne. So that's 9 voting members total on that first one.
Got it. I must have missed when Andrew joined. I'm sorry about that.
Great. And then can you just read us back the poll we just did, just so that we can make sure everyone's good on that one more time, and then we'll move on to the open discussion.
My screen just froze, so I'm not sure if you can hear me. But for policy A, I have Jeff, Jack, Rob, Andrew, Mark, Amy, and Yuko. So that's 7. And Rob abstained.
I think you
I
missed
have something.
D. I think you missed DM on policy A.
I didn't abstain.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
there-
it was Brandon who abstained. Sorry, I'm seeing how valuable these polls are. Sorry, we couldn't make that work this time. When we switch hosts in the middle, it ruins the recording.
And I might need you guys to keep your hands up longer than taking them out. So do you guys want to redo the poll real quick or continue as is?
I think I got it. It's in the chat.
Okay.
Unless one of the task force members disagrees and wants to redo it. I think we're good. Okay. Thanks. Sorry about that, everyone, but we got it. All right. So are there any other topics the tree task force members would like to discuss? We had a couple people write in. And I want to start off with just asking Jeff really quick. You sent me an email about how you wanted to talk about appeals, and then you sent me another email, and I didn't get to read it before the meeting. But it seemed like maybe you weren't sure if you wanted to bring it up.
Well, you discussed about it earlier. The way I remembered it, I remembered what you said was that the council wanted to have the tree appeals go to the DRC, but you subsequently, with Jessica, said that the council wanted to go to a hearings officer, which I really strongly agree with. But so we don't need to discuss it. I just made a mistake, I guess. my notes were wrong from the council meeting.
Yeah, all good. From that council meeting, again, we didn't get clear direction from council, but they did ask for some more information about what the hearings officer led hearing would look like, and the ability for the public to engage in that process. I don't know if Jessica's had any further conversations with legal. I know that she's very busy with lots of different meetings, but that's kind of what we're hoping to bring forward with the code amendments, is just a little bit more information. I think that, yeah, Jessica, you unmuted.
Yeah, I would just say that I do have more information on the hearings officer process, and I literally just got that from our city attorney yesterday, so I haven't dove into it, but I will discuss that in the staff report and the presentation to the Planning Commission at the public hearing. With the tree task force, we didn't plan on revisiting this because we got clear direction from the task force on this, and we will certainly let the Planning Commission know about that so that they will know which boards and commissions and what the task force position was on this.
One last
Thank you for that
comment,
update.
a quick comment. Having sat on the DRC, when you get on the DRC, you don't understand the tree code. You don't know what you're ruling on. And so you have inconsistent rulings and you're trying to figure out what it is and you're just lost. And about the time you figure out what it is, then you're going off the DRC. So for consistency and fairness, a hearing officer would be so much better, in my opinion. Sorry to take your time.
Brandon, and then we'll move on to a topic that Amy emailed in about.
I was just going to agree with Jeff. I've worked for a municipality where hearings were heard through a hearing officer. And it was actually like a great opportunity for the urban forester we would even take the hearing officer to go look at the trees and to discuss it on site with them as well. So there's like a real good opportunity to get somebody that's familiar with the code and to kind of have that relationship with the urban forester.
Thank you. So I'd like to bring up a topic that Amy emailed in, and I'll let Amy say this in her own words, but it's, she asked the question, has the new tree code revision addressed citizen concerns sufficiently? And she gave some context about what she means by citizen concern, and I'll pass it off to Amy.
Okay, thank you. My comment was, it is evident how much work has been done to revise this tree code to state requirements, and I'm conscious too of the time. The question I hear most often from neighbors and other concerned citizens, and why I applied to be a part of this task force, is about the protection of significant and heritage trees when they are within the site of proposed development of large homes. It is a common perception that it does not change the outcome of tree loss when neighbors and tree advocates submit comments to the city asking for review or denial of a permit. Has the new tree code revision addressed this citizen concern sufficiently? Has the task force, with the removal of, quote, subjective language like protection of neighborhood character, importance of significant trees, preservation versus irreplaceable loss, impact on street views for the, quote, clear and objective standards, has the updated tree code provided ways for these concerns to be adequately represented? And that I would add, is there a way for people who are trying to find their way to submit concern to do that? Is there like a directional sheet to say, when you have this concern, go there? And I realize I'm speaking to the subjective, which has been, mandated and ruled out and corrected, and for expediency's sake, and also for a kind of a legitimate response. But this is the concern I hear about the most and feel the most.
Yeah, Amy, I hear you. And with HB 4037, the clear and objective process, you can't even appeal it. The public can't even appeal it anymore. So it it literally takes away public input on tree removal through the clear and objective process. And I can't do anything about it. I agree with you that it takes away the public's ability to have any say in it. But that is the reality that we're dealing with. So that is what the amendments will reflect. I will tell you that in terms of how we tried to address significant trees, it is difficult to do that in a clear and objective manner because it is by its nature subjective. We went to a lot of pains to figure out the right percentage based on kind of the tree removal that we've seen in the past. So trying to come up with that right percentage. And you obviously get more credit if you have larger trees. That counts towards the larger DBH. So that gets at the larger, more significant trees and trying to retain those. And then we also built in an incentive that you actually get a bonus if you retain trees of a certain size and a certain species that are high value to the city, like certain size fir or Douglas firs or certain size Oregon oaks. So we did our best to do that, but clear and objective is a blunt object. I mean, it's a blunt instrument. I don't know how you can get into significant negative impact on the character and aesthetics through something that is completely clear and objective. So it was a very difficult thing to do, and that is why we retained the 2-track process, which I think people are not going to like very much because it is still treating the housing development or developers differently than just regular property owners. But if you don't, then you have to bring everybody down to the level of the clear and objective standards, and then you have a lot more tree removal. So there's policy trade-offs there that we've discussed with this task force as well as with other boards and commissions. I hear you.
Yeah, and I hear you too. And I feel that it's just very important for me as a former tree code, the original, and this one as well, to represent this issue that comes up so often among neighbors, among concerned citizens that I hear about. And we haven't had a chance really because there's no room in the clear and objective, which is also subjective, by the way. There's no real room to have the discussion. There's a mandate, and I understand and appreciate that. I don't like it, but I understand it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's definitely a big kind of trade-off that we're grappling here, especially as we're required to do all these things, but we're trying to make sure that we're not treating private property owners and developers entirely different. But that's kind of how it turned out. And I'll let Morgan have the last word before we do wrap up here.
Just wanted to point out, because Amy did specifically mention heritage trees and significant trees and the concerns. And so with the clear and objective standards, the code amendments specifically say that heritage trees are not eligible under that subsection. So a heritage tree would have to go through a discretionary tract. And in addition, with significant trees can be removed under the clear and objective track, but with the code amendments adopting the new tree table to define what a significant tree is, we were able to further amend the clear and objective criteria so that 2-to-1 mitigation would be required for significant tree removal. So those changes are included in the most recent draft.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. That was a good summary. And before I go to wrap up, I don't want to ignore. Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing just to that end of that discussion? I also want to point out that because we recognize that, that development does have more of an impact and the clear and objective process, we don't know, but it could result in more trees and we may need to refine things later on. But we are requiring street trees to be planted for all new dwelling units. Before it was only required in certain areas of the city, and now we're going to do it everywhere. So we're hoping that will result in more trees being planted as well to kind of get at that issue. So getting at it in sort of indirect ways.
Yeah, I hope, Amy, as you continue to kind of have discussions with all of those people in your circle, you can kind of nod towards this process and kind of cite some of the changes where we that Morgan just mentioned and Jessica just mentioned that can hopefully bring a little light into this kind of this major trade-off that's happening right now with housing development. You know, we don't want people to hate housing, but it's really changing the way things work around here in terms of tree removals. So yeah, thank you, Morgan and Jessica, for kind of having that great summary. Mark, I didn't want to ignore your email. You wrote in about the minor forest management permits, and we discussed that. And then we covered this briefly when I covered all the topics that we covered with every single group at the beginning. You wanted to just clarify a comment and suggestion you made during the SAB and Parks meeting, where you just wanted to make sure if it was possible, if we were allowing the removal of invasive plants in lieu of tree planting, it was only if there was not enough room to replant required trees. And this is not really an issue anymore now that it's only going to be for city projects, and we're only allowing cities to utilize this trade-off. So there's going to be professionals kind of having that input, and the city forestry team and parks team is going to have input there. It's the risk now of putting it in like the hands of a private property owner to kind of go through this checklist and make these really tough decisions. It's not currently what's being moved forward in the code.
I noticed that. That's why I didn't bring it up. Yep.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure no one's feeling left out. I know we're 2 minutes over, but we're here. We have 2 more hearings as part of this project. We're bringing an updated version of the code amendments to the Planning Commission hearing on June 8th at 6:30, and you are all encouraged to attend that session, as well as the City Council hearing. So that's final amendment presentation July 21st at 3 p.m. And we had a great suggestion by a Tree Task Force members to gather feedback about your experience with this process, and so we can gather some feedback about things that you liked, things that you didn't like, things that we could improve on in the future in this engagement process with advisory committees and around topics like code. So Jessica is going to be following up with some sort of form or some input, some way to provide input on that. But we wanted to convey a really big thank you, from me personally and Cascadia and the consultant team, Christine, as well as city staff. The mayor wanted to also specifically let all of you know how much he appreciates you all for being part of this process and how much council appreciates your input. I don't know if anybody else has any other thank yous they want to say. Jessica, Councilor
yes.
Wendland, you're welcome to speak up.
I would. And I want to respect everybody's time and thank you for staying a little bit longer here. This is a difficult process. Trees are a big deal in the city, and I've worked here for 25 years, and I know how important it is, and it's important to me too. And this process is not going to make everybody happy. It's probably not even going to make everybody happy on the Tree Task Force, even though you were directly involved. And we recognize that, but your input was so important and is so important. It really helped us. We took it to heart. It's reflected in the amendments, and you guys did really great work. And we just really appreciate your time on this. And I hope that you will either, if you're able to attend the hearings or at least watch, we'd love for you to participate. You're certainly also welcome to testify if you wish to. You're all of it is open for public comment and testimony at both of the hearings. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I know a lot of you personally, and it's been a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. And I hope I don't have to come back and amend this code anytime soon, but I do recognize that there's some new elements in here that we won't be afraid to refine them if it's not getting the results that we need. So I want to assure you all that if we find it's not working, we can come back and make refinements. So thank you all very much for your volunteerism and your time.
Thank you, Jessica.
Jessica, my one last question is, how does this task force approve meeting minutes from today?
That is a good question. I have to look back and see what we've done in the past, because yeah, we can't like meet forever, because then you'd have to do the meeting minutes of that. So I'll look into that, but I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe we can do it via email, but I'll follow up on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was my last item. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening.